Welcome back to the Against All Odds, the Less Than 1% Chance podcast with your host, Maria Ponte, where we will hear stories of incredible people thriving against all odds. And my hope is that we can all see how life is always happening for us, even when we are the less than 1% chance. Hey, welcome back to Against All Odds, the Less Than 1% Chance podcast with your host, Maria Aponte. I hope you're doing fantastic today. I am so incredibly honored that I have this guest on today. You won't see her face. You'll actually see the cover of her book. I am just in awe with what I've learned so far about her. I am so incredibly appreciative of the fact that she's here. Her name is Mia Hanks. She's a survivor of narcissistic abuse. She was married to a covert narcissist for 29 years and has recently published a memoir titled Bridemaid, a Memoir. She hopes that with her book, she can help other victims find their voice and speak out about narcissistic abuse. She's really passionate about healing from narcissistic abuse, gaslighting, coercive control, divorcing a narcissist. Those are topics that she is super passionate about. And I know that this is going to serve so many. And I have just so much respect for the strength that it takes to remove yourself from this situation. So, Mia, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be
I'm
here.
I'm so excited to have you here. Do you want to get into a little bit of your story and then we'll go into some questions after that?
Yeah, sure. So you read my bio. I was married to a covert narcissist for 29 years, um, and finally was able to understand what I was going through. And it took a long time to figure it out. But once I did, I was able to get away and start a new life. So it's been a journey for sure. And I decided, I guess I'll give you a bit about why I wrote the book. I'm not an author. I've never written before. But when I was going through, when I realized that what was happening to me was abuse and that my ex-husband was in fact a narcissist, I started doing a lot of research about narcissism. And there are a lot of great books out there. I read lots and lots of them. The problem I found was that all of these books were written generally by a psychologist, a therapist, and they were very academic. And what I wanted to find, what I wanted to read was someone who had actually lived this. And I just couldn't find anything out there really. So I decided once I had gotten away and gone through some therapy and done some healing, I really thought there might be a need for a memoir type of a book from someone's perspective who had lived these things. So that's why I wrote it. And I hope that it's helpful to other people out there that might be in similar situations that where they're not sure what they're going through. And I include a lot of tips. And for instance, tips on leaving a narcissist. That's a very difficult thing to do. So I hope that people can benefit from the information in there. And just from my experience, I hope it can help people.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you give some background? Because I know that this word is said a lot more lately, but not everybody understands what it is. So can you give some background on what is narcissistic personality disorder?
Yeah, so narcissism is probably an overused term, and really everyone has some narcissistic traits. It's just human. But narcissistic personality disorder is a different thing in that it is a personality disorder. These people, they tend to lack empathy. They are very self-serving. Everything is about them. And so they are master manipulators and they're all about control.
Yeah.
So when you're with a narcissist, it is 100% them 100% of the time. And you slowly lose yourself to these people. They will take everything you have emotionally, and they just don't have any remorse. It's about them and no one else. So everything that they do seemingly nice generally has an agenda behind it. So it's a hard thing to grasp if you haven't lived it. Most people that have not lived in such a situation can't believe that those kind of things happen. And myself, I was very young when I got married. I was 21. And I came from a very sheltered background, no trauma in my past, just a very idyllic childhood. And I came into this marriage very naive. I didn't, I had never known a narcissist. I had never known anyone with this level of personality disorder. And so I just didn't think these kind of people existed. It just wasn't, I couldn't wrap my head around it. So I spent the better part of my marriage convinced through gaslighting and whatnot, that the issues were me. It was all me. It was not him. And so that's why it took so long for me to finally start figuring it out. Narcissists, they don't get better. They tend to get worse with age. So you just reach a breaking point.
So again, another word that's being used a lot, and I don't know if people truly understand it. Can you explain what gaslighting is?
Yeah. So gaslighting, it is a word that suddenly gained a lot of popularity. Interesting. Gaslighting is something that narcissists will do. Almost all narcissists use this tactic. And it's basically where they change the narrative to make you think that you're going crazy. And it actually comes from, there was a play, and I'm not sure, it was a very old play, maybe from the 40s or something. And then later it was a movie, but there was a play called Gaslight. And it was about, I haven't seen it, but I understand it's about a husband who tried to make his wife think she was going crazy. He would dim the gas lights in the evenings and she would notice, and then he would tell her, no, I didn't do that, you're losing your mind. So that's where the term originates. But they'll do things like, they'll say, if you're upset about something they said or did, they'll say, well, it wasn't that big of a deal, you are just too sensitive. And then you really start to second guess yourself and say, well, maybe it wasn't a big deal, maybe I am crazy, maybe I'm too sensitive and I'm taking things too seriously. And so you start to convince yourself that, yeah, they're right, I'm wrong, I must be losing it.
Yeah. So I have a question, or maybe just a kind of a story that, so I have 3 kids and my youngest is 15, and she got into this long distance relationship. He was like 3.5 hours away. They met via a mutual friend, never met each other. And so this was always all over the phone. And maybe like a month into them quote unquote dating at that time, it was like their 1 month, and he posts on Snapchat like this huge, like, oh my gosh, love bombing. My girlfriend's
Yes.
perfect. I love her so much. She's beautiful. This huge paragraph about how much he loves his most perfect girlfriend. And then she posts something not as long. It was like maybe less of a paragraph than what he had. And I caught her with a phone when she was not supposed to have it, because I take their phones overnight. I saw the messages, and he was basically telling her, is that it? Is that all you're posting? Is that all?
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God. Like
Red
I was
flag.
hyperventilating as I was like, oh my God, I see this is like a start of a really horrible life if this is what she's allowing to happen.
Yes. Yes.
And again, she's 15, so I had to be and I have 2 older ones. So I just had to be very careful of how I said things, and she was still asleep. And so I took the phone, so she knew that I had the phone, and I didn't give her phone. And so when she wakes up in the morning, I had already meditated. I worked out. I was like, I need to get my head in straight so that I can approach this so that she doesn't feel attacked. I was on her way to an appointment with her, and I was like, so obviously that I found this like old phone that we had. And she's like, yeah, I figured. And so I was like, so I looked through your messages and I saw this conversation happening. And I'm not here to tell you whether or not you should be with him, or that's your choice. But
Right.
my job as your mom is to make you aware of things that I need you to be aware of. So his post for your 1 month anniversary was so beautiful, super sweet, very loving, and that's amazing. And then he was telling you that you were not enough. So he was telling you that you were perfect in the post and that you were amazing and all the things, and then telling you that you didn't do enough and like making you feel bad for not posting as much as he did. And I just want to tell you, my love, that that is a combination of love bombing and gaslighting.
Yes.
And I need you to be very aware that I don't know this kid. He's 14, 15 years old. I don't know how he was brought up, so I can't tell you what he is accustomed to. However, that is not okay. That is the start of a very abusive relationship, and I really need you to be aware of that. And she stayed quiet. Thankfully, that same day, later in the afternoon, she had a therapy appointment. And I'm so incredibly grateful that things happened the way they did. But she
Great
went to
timing.
therapy. Yeah, it was perfect. It was
Yeah.
so perfect. I truly feel like everything that happens always tends to like fall into place somehow or another.
Yes.
And so it was this big coincidence that she did. And when she got out of therapy, she was like, well, mom, I have to have 3 conversations. I was like, okay. And she's like, the first one is with you. I'm so sorry that I took that old phone. I I will accept the consequences to that because I know that was wrong, because we had a whole conversation about that. The second is with her boyfriend. And she said, I do realize that's what he was doing, and I do realize that I felt horrible about myself
Hmm.
and that I really need to work on me. I need to let him know that he needs to work on whatever is happening with him. And if he wants to work on it as a couple, that's fine, but I need to work on me and loving me more. And I was like, oh my God, what is happening? This is
Yeah,
awesome.
that is awesome.
And then, so she had this conversation with him, and they ended up breaking up like a month later, which is what needed to happen anyways. But I
The
wasn't going
best.
to be the one to
Yes.
to tell her that, because I was a teenager too, and I would have been like, "Oh no, you told me no. I'm gonna do
I'm
yes."
gonna do it.
Yeah. So, and then the third conversation was one with my boyfriend, which is we've been together for 5 years. So her stepdad, and how she's just appreciative of the role that he plays in her life, and that she can talk to him about everything and really feels grateful for that. So it was just an awesome
Yeah.
situation all around. And hopefully with that, she is now more equipped to see those
Yes.
signs.
And that's the problem. Most people are not.
Yeah.
They don't, they would see something like what you just described and really not think that much of it.
Yeah.
They
And
just see
feel
on the
bad.
surface, and yeah, I feel bad, but it's not that big of a deal. And that's just the start.
Maybe he's right. Maybe I didn't post as much. And how can you be told that you're perfect and amazing and beautiful and then you're not enough?
Hmm.
Like, what? Just, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I saw that and I was like, oh my God. I'm here
Yeah.
in my office reading these messages, and I'm like, oh my God. Okay, I need to go meditate. I need to calm down before I go in there and like guns
Yeah.
blazing. And I was like, okay, I need to calm down. And I did. And it was the way like myself 5 years ago when my oldest was 15 would have been totally a different scenario. So I feel like I'm grateful that I've grown as a parent. But what you were describing, I was like, oh my God, that was
Yeah.
my like scary, oh goodness, don't start this so early.
Yeah.
Let's
And
get
it
this aware
starts so
now.
slow. It starts so slow and so quote unquote innocent.
Yeah,
And then before you know it, you're in the thick of it, and then
hard to
you're
leave.
stuck. You're
Yeah.
stuck, basically. So the more
So
gaslighting and the more control, that's heaped on you, the more stuck you feel, and you just don't think you can get out.
Yeah. So what do you think are the reasons that many victims stay with their abusers for so long?
I think a lot of victims really are convinced that they are the problem and that if they will change, if they will work on themselves, then they can make the relationship work because that's how you're conditioned to believe. Um, and another reason that I think victims stay is, well, a couple. Another reason is out of fear. They just don't want to know what the alternative, what the consequences could be to them leaving. And so out of fear, it seems the safest thing to do. But another reason people stay is another thing that narcissists do is financial abuse. So in a lot of these relationships, the narcissist is controlling all the money.
Yeah.
So even if you're in a high socioeconomic tier, it really doesn't matter. Because if you can't access that money, if you can't, my husband had all these accounts and he had a credit card and all these cards and such. All I had access to was just the day-to-day checking account. I had a debit card and that was it. And so fortunately, I had my parents and they are the ones that ultimately helped me get out. But if I hadn't had them, I had no funds to I could have gone in and gotten a hotel for a couple of nights, but I had no funds or resources to say, go get an apartment.
Yeah.
Um, I wouldn't have been able to do that. I'm living in this beautiful big home behind gates, and yet I had no resources to even go get myself an apartment. So
Yeah.
had it been for my parents being able to help me, my only option, again, being in this big, beautiful home, would have been to go to a shelter.
Yeah.
That would have been my only option. And so I think a lot of women are in that situation, and that is their only option. They
Yeah.
can stay where they are, they can go to a shelter. So there are not a lot of good options.
Yeah, I agree. I have a friend of mine that had to escape a very abusive relationship and with two kids in a shelter. It was just
Wow.
hard,
Yeah,
hard.
and I think most people just don't want to go that route. And most assuredly, when you leave a narcissist, the first thing they're going to do is cut off any funding. They're
Yeah.
going to drain the bank account, which was my experience. 29 years of marriage, and I didn't even have, he kept the bank account so low that I couldn't even buy groceries. So they get
Yeah.
revengeful. And
Yeah.
it's a scary time. It is scary.
Yeah, I bet. So, what are obviously there's financial challenges in leaving a narcissist, but are there any other things that they try to put in your way as obstacles? I guess.
Yeah, in my situation, I dealt with a lot of guilt. And a lot of that was from all of the gaslighting. It took me a long time to understand that he was the one that had the issues. I was still second guessing myself, and he knew that. So he tried to make amends and whatnot. They weren't sincere, but nonetheless, he tried because he knew he could play on that guilt factor. So they do that. And then the other thing that they do, and my ex-husband did this, is they will start going to your friends and your family and
Yeah.
saying she's unhinged, she's having a midlife crisis, you've got to talk to her, make her come back, she's just going crazy. And really what they're doing is damage control. They're getting out there to everybody they can as fast as they can to let people think that you're the problem, that you're having this breakdown and that's why you left, because they can't have their image tarnished.
Yeah.
Yes, my ex-husband did that, and I think it's a very common tactic. It's a race to see who can get to the most people the fastest. And
Yeah.
if they can get their story out there and make you look ridiculous, then that's a win for them.
I don't normally look at the news at all. Um but I did see somewhere on social media about a case that's happening currently with a lady that her husband was a pastor. I don't
Yes,
know.
I'm familiar with this. I've seen this
Yeah.
as well.
And the way that just some of the videos that I've seen that he speaks to the whole church
Yes.
about her mental state and like Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Can it be any more evident? That's exactly what he is. Is that
Yeah,
like,
exactly. It's been all over social media and people
yeah,
are really reacting to it. It's scary.
it is
You
so
know, that
scary.
is how sure they are that they are right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, it makes me very, having daughters, particularly, I know that this isn't just a woman thing, but having daughters, it it terrifies me,
Yes.
especially having gone through just a situation with a 15-year-old. And I'm very like vocal, and I love that you were able to put your story in a book for people to be able to experience, even through your words, what you experience, because I feel like these aren't things that normally are talked about. And had our parents been more aware of these situations and vocalize, I'm very open with my kids. I talk to them about absolutely everything, experiences that I've gone through and everything, because I remember having gone through some experiences as a teenager that I didn't feel I could talk to my parents about. And I want the exact opposite of that for my kids. I want them to come to me about
Yes.
absolutely
Everything.
everything. And so these stories are so important, which honestly, I'm going to get your book and I'm going to read it so that I can have that in my back pocket for my daughter to be able to read, or at least listen to the story. I gauge what I'm obviously telling each of the kids, and this is like so important because it fuels awareness. It feeds that awareness to so many people. And I truly like hope that all people like read this and are aware of the signs, because it's so scary. My sister was in an abusive relationship, very narcissistic as well, but it was physical abuse as well. And so I remember feeling the like powerless feeling of she completely closed us off, because she knew that as soon as I found out, or anybody found
Yeah.
out what was happening, like it
Well,
it
it's
would have.
embarrassing too, the victim. That's another factor. And in my situation, no one knew
Yeah.
what was really going on because it's embarrassing. And
And
that's one thing that I struggled with when I decided to write my book was this is embarrassing. And the therapist that I was seeing said, no, it's not embarrassing. And I said, but it is to me. It's embarrassing to admit that I put up with this for as long
yeah,
as I did and that I lived this way for so long. And you get into this groove where you don't want people to know. So you do tend to shut down and close people off because you don't want them to know what's really happening.
yeah,
So, and that's another reason why I think people end up staying in these relationships. It's just the embarrassment factor.
yeah. Yeah, I definitely can see that. So what are the challenges in divorcing a narcissist?
Well, they're very vindictive. And they don't, they, they're not people that can handle the word no. So right away, when you leave a narcissist, that is a huge blow to their ego. They are going to try to get revenge. So in my situation, when I left, my ex-husband, like I said, he tried to drain the bank accounts, make it to where I couldn't even buy groceries. They have they're relentless. They don't care how much they hurt you at that point because you are no longer a supply to them. They can't own you anymore. So anything they have to do to hurt you, they will. But yeah, the divorce process, just doing things like drawing the process out as long as they can. One thing he thought he could do is just wear me down. When we went to our divorce mediation, we were there for 10 hours.
Oh my gosh.
10 hours. So he just thought the longer he could hold out and the longer he could fight, he was waiting for me to give up, just give in And so that's what they'll do. They'll just try to wear you down to the point that you say, I'm tired. I just want out. You just take everything. I just want out and I don't want to fight anymore.
Yeah.
So they're just relentless. And that's the biggest challenge in divorcing them. And then the weird thing is they don't care because they don't have that empathy in a normal divorce with normal neurotypical people. Generally, I would think the husband would want to make sure that it's on some level the mother of his children was being taken care of, but not with a narcissist. They don't care. If they could leave you homeless, living under the freeway, they would be proud of themselves.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest challenge. They literally do not care. And once you've left, that's it. They're done with you and they don't care what they have to do to hurt you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really tough because you have these like expectations of people
Yes.
that they can't even fulfill. And it's so hard to process the why were you doing this?
Yeah.
It's really, really hard because then they also don't take into account like how this is hurting our children or
Right.
our family, and to see that this is their parent, and it blows my mind. I wholeheartedly believe that just people that I'm close to have been married to narcissists,
Mhm.
and it is very frustrating even watching it happen, that you're like, who is this person? What are they thinking? Why are they talking to their kids about their parents that way? Like, just, and everything that you're saying is like, oh my gosh, yeah, check, check, check. Oh, wow, it just blows my mind.
It's crazy how they're all so much alike.
Yeah.
It's almost like they have this playbook that they all follow. It's just down to like the weird things that they do that I thought was just my ex-husband. And the more research and reading I did and talking to people, I realized these little quirks, it's typical of narcissists. For example, sleep deprivation. They like to use sleep deprivation. They like to keep you sleep deprived so that you are in a fog. And when you're tired and worn down, you're easier to control. So
Yeah. Oh
I
my
thought that was
gosh.
just something with my ex-husband, but in fact, I've heard so many people talk about that. My narcissistic husband won't let me sleep, or they keep waking me up on purpose so that I'm tired all day. So it's just weird little quirky things like that that they all do. And it's very odd.
Wow. That's so interesting. But that makes sense because yeah, absolutely. You're way easier to control when you're just so exhausted.
Yes. And then, of course,
That's
that leads to health issues. I experienced in the last probably 2 years of my marriage, I was experiencing chronic pain, headaches, stomach aches. I felt nauseous all the time. And I was just overtired, just so fatigued all the time.
yeah. Isn't it, and I say this from my own experience, but isn't it crazy how when your body is in dis-ease, it creates this disease, and when you heal that dis-ease, everything kind of falls back into place.
Yeah, I was about 2 weeks after I officially moved out. It was amazing how different I felt.
Yeah.
I wasn't experiencing so much pain. And I realized so much of how I was feeling was because I was under so much stress. You live in this fight or flight mode,
All the time.
and
Yeah.
it's just not good. It
Yeah.
really does impact your health in ways that you can't see.
Yeah.
So
And
that's if for no other reason to leave, do it for your health.
yeah, I agree. I wholeheartedly believe that. So, do you believe that a narcissist can ever change?
Unfortunately, I don't.
Oh,
I hate to sound so like doom and gloom, but I just don't think so. NPD is a personality disorder and there's not a cure. And the problem is you can go to therapy with a narcissist all day long. It does not do any good. I did that, in fact, with my ex-husband. We went to two different marriage therapists. It doesn't work. Narcissists love to go to therapy
yeah,
because
because they
they have
can
a way
prove
of
that they're
harming.
right.
Yeah, they charm the therapist, and it's then they get the therapist on their side if it's an unexperienced therapist. Now, we ultimately ended up with a really good therapist who had a lot of experience. And after about the eighth session, she actually kicked him out of therapy, which was, I didn't think therapists did that. But
Yeah.
she actually told him, she said, I can't help you. She said, you're not self-aware. And she said, you are not willing or able to see things from other people's perspectives. And for that reason, she said, no amount of therapy is going to help you. And she literally told him, I wish you luck, don't come back. So, no, I don't think that they can get better. There might be a fraction of a percentage of narcissists that decide they want to become self aware, but that's just not the nature of their personality. So, I only see that they get worse.
Yeah.
My ex-husband, he just got progressively worse and worse and worse.
And
More
I think,
controlling, more insidious, just mean.
yeah, because they also have more time to continue to like, because they're very convinced of their story.
Yes.
So they have more time to just like fester on that story.
Mhm.
And I could see that. I could definitely see that. So, what limiting beliefs or roadblocks did you have to overcome in order to get to where you are today? And then which ones do you love like helping other people work through themselves?
Well, for me, the biggest roadblock, the biggest issue that I had after I left and just dealing with the healing side of it was the guilt. I
Yeah.
felt guilty for leaving, and I told the therapist I was seeing, which I think therapy was a big help for me. I told her, I kept saying, I've ruined his life. Because when I left, it did turn his world upside down. And she said, no, he tried to ruin your life. So I had to turn that around and realize that no, I didn't. It made life inconvenient for him for a while, going through this messy divorce that was a very hostile divorce, but it didn't ruin his life. So it took time for me to realize that. The other thing that I felt guilty about was I kept saying every day wasn't bad.
Yeah.
So, how do I know that I did the right thing by leaving? Because there were good days. We did have
Yeah.
good times. And I was talking to a friend about this, and my friend said, this isn't a math problem. One good day does not cancel out a bad day.
Yeah.
And then the best kind of advice that I was given was there are not enough good days in the world to make up for one day of trauma that he put you through. And that
Yes.
was a huge eye-opening statement. When
Yeah.
I said that, it really did. The guilt that I was experiencing just vanished at that point. And that
Yeah.
just replaying in my head. If just one day of trauma is too much.
Yeah.
So if we have 364 good days and one horrible day of trauma, that's too much.
Yeah.
So
I
that
agree.
guilt was the biggest factor for me.
Yeah, I could see that. And we tend to attach ourselves to the good times.
Yes.
And but it was so good and I was so in love or
Yeah.
oh, it's so sad. That's what we do and we like don't see those really tough days or that or you don't want to remember the heartbreak and you
Yeah.
sobbing in your room or whatever. But just
You learn to block it out. And
yeah.
that's what I did. You just block it out, and the next day's a good day. So you move on. And another thing narcissists will do is they call it breadcrumbing. So when they think they've pushed you maybe a little bit too far, they reel you back in by they might buy you a gift, they might take you out to a nice dinner, they might be really nice for about a week. And then that sort of you start to forget, well, that was really bad, but look at these nice things he did. And you
Yeah.
focus on the good and you suppress the bad. And yeah, that's another reason that I think people end up staying. It's just this give and take.
Yeah. And they continue to hold on to the good days.
Yes.
It's so
Yeah.
that's such a cycle and it's scary that I feel like they do it even unconsciously, right? They don't
They
even
do.
realize that this is the type of human you're being. And
They're just programmed that way. And
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I'm so incredibly happy that you got out because no one deserves to live that way. And I agree. I think that therapy is seriously, I think everybody in the world needs to find a good
It's,
therapist.
yeah, yeah.
We would be much happier people and more healed people because it is so hard to navigate sometimes. And when you have a third party perspective that can guide you in a way that kind of makes you dig in deep because
Yeah,
they
yeah.
typically do. And that's why we don't do the work on our own, is because that dig deep moment is so hard to,
Yeah. It's easier just to suppress it.
yeah. And unfortunately, when we do suppress, it just eats away at us even more.
It does.
So,
Yeah, it really does.
oh my goodness. So I can't wait to read your book. I am very excited for our listeners to listen to this episode. I think it just opened up a lot of conversations, and I truly hope that your story, I think it's such a blessing to see how life is happening for you and not to you, right? So you could look at it as I'm the victim of this, or you could say, okay, I experienced this and what purpose can I find from it? And I think that this book is such a beautiful purpose.
I hope so. You were talking earlier about, I think one of the biggest questions that victims will get asked is, why do you stay so long?
Yeah.
And that's one thing it's very interesting. And I think, there are a lot of answers like I talked about. But in my book, I put a quote in, and I think it's the best explanation for the best answer for that question. And it's a quote I found online, and it's actually by Stephen King, the author.
Oh,
And my understanding is if this is something that he said during an interview. I haven't seen the interview, but I thought the quote was just it really sums it up. So it's just a short little paragraph. So I can I share it?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. There's a phrase, the elephant in the living room, which purports to describe what it's like to live with a drug addict, an alcoholic, an abuser. People outside such relationships will sometimes ask, how could you let such a business go on for so many years? Didn't you see the elephant in the living room? And it's so hard for anyone living in a more normal situation to understand the answer that comes closest to the truth. I'm sorry, but it was there when I moved in. I didn't know it was an elephant. I thought it was part of the furniture. There comes an aha moment for some folks, the lucky ones, when they suddenly recognize the difference. So I think that's a good explanation for, like, I married very young, and I love the part where it says, I thought it was part of the furniture.
Yeah.
I thought
Gosh.
this was how it was supposed to be. I thought this was normal. And as time went on, I made it my normal.
Yeah.
I normalized the abuse. So I think that's probably the best explanation for why does somebody stay? Why could somebody stay for 29 years? You really normalize the abuse.
Yeah.
And that's where the awareness needs to come into play. And we need to stop normalizing it because it's not
Yeah.
normal. It's not
Agreed.
healthy.
That's an amazing quote. Thank you for sharing that. I got goosebumps as you were reading that, especially at that specific moment when it was always there. Thank you so much. Mia,
Sure.
this was amazing. I so appreciate it. Thank you so much. Listeners, I hope you got so much out of today, just like I did. All the information for Mia's book in the show notes. And these are great conversations to open up, especially with younger generations that are not as aware of what can, because I married young too, so I can attest to the fact that we just didn't know any better.
Yeah.
And we go into things naive. And so I urge you to have an open conversation about these scenarios. And even if you're not the recipient of this type of abuse, hopefully you're not. However, you can help prevent some somebody that you love from experiencing these things with the stories that you hear. So I hope that's what this podcast helps you with, is to show you the stories of people that have overcome so many things, and that it opens up conversations about these situations so that your loved ones are more informed and aware of the people that come into their lives. So Mia, thank you again. Listeners, thank you so much. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Peace out, guys. Love your life.